So the last pramana is the shabda pramana, and shabda pramana means, shabda means word, and word means here it is Vedas, Shruti, and Shruti pramana is considered the highest pramana, because all these other pramanas, pratyaksha pramana based on perception, inference, anumana pramana inference, and then examples upamana and arthapatti and anupalabdhi pramana, all these can reveal knowledge only of the things of this world. But for things which are not of this world, like for example, there is always a question, even in the Vedas, the whole Upanishad, Kathopanishad deals with what happens to a person after death. Then, to know what happens after death, these 5 pramanas cannot be of any help. So these 5 pramanas, instruments of knowledge, can only reveal things of this world. Whether a person goes to heavens or hell or some other place, and what is his ultimate final destination after death, whether he comes back, and finally eventually when he gets out of the cycle, where does he land, all these questions cannot be answered by these 5 earlier mentioned pramanas. There only the shabda pramana comes in and gives the answers, because shabda pramana is the greatest among all the pramanas, the ultimate authority in spiritual knowledge, because anadigata abhadita jnanam yasmat tat shabda pramana. Anadigata, that is that knowledge which is not revealed by any other means of knowledge, anadigata knowledge, pramana. And abhadita, that which is not negated by any other pramana. These are the 2 unique features of shabda pramana, which is the Vedas. And therefore Vedas are considered as the highest authority for paravidya. Paravidya means the saving knowledge, for the liberating knowledge, for a person who wants to realize the truth and then free himself from samsara. For paravidya, shabda pramana is the only recourse, and therefore you cannot bypass it, and you cannot reach that goal bypassing the Vedas or Vedic revelations or Vedantic knowledge. Therefore, Vedas constitute the Shabda Pramana or Shruti Pramana. And here, as I mentioned earlier, Vedas, 98% of it cater to the Arthakama pursuit within the parameters of Dharma, that is the first 3 Purusharthas, and maybe less than 2% is the Jnana Kanda. It is called Veda Antaha. So, Karma Kanda is called as Veda Purva, and Jnana Kanda is called as Veda Antaha. We have to understand the word Sanskrit terminology here very precisely, because they convey very precise meanings, and therefore there is no scope for ambiguity in these matters. And therefore, for example, in modern times, there are people, sometimes even great philosophers, great famous people, without knowing the meaning of these words, they come to very drastic conclusions which can be absolutely wrong. So, I take the permission to liberty to say this, even to quote this, with all humility, with all modesty. For example, the great philosopher of recent times, Jiddu Krishnamurti, in one of his dialogues with Swami Venkateshananda, who was a direct disciple of Swami Shivananda, these dialogues, I read it some time back in the Awakening of Intelligence book, the Krishnamurti literature. There he says, Krishnamurti was known for his negation of all authority, all scriptures, all tradition, all no guru, no god, no books, etc. This was a very drastic standpoint that he took up, and he maintained it till the end. But then the reason he gave this was based on a very simple fallacy. He told Swami Venkateshananda that Vedanta means end of knowledge. And end of knowledge, if you have to get out of knowledge, then why get into it at all? This was his raison d'etre of his argument. that why go through all this process if you have to get out of it at the seeing its futility at the end. So Vedanta means the ending of knowledge, and if you have to, if this knowledge has to end, why unnecessarily accumulate it? This has a very deep logical fallacy, because this stems from not understanding the word Vedanta itself. Vedanta means, Anta means end, Veda means Vedas, that is ending of, Veda means comes from the root with, to know, though the knowledge, Vedas represent knowledge. Vedanta means not end of knowledge, but the final knowledge, that is the highest knowledge. Vedanta means the highest knowledge, not the ending of knowledge. It is the highest knowledge, final knowledge, after knowing which there is nothing more to know. This is the meaning of Vedanta, and if this meaning had been understood properly, perhaps this negation of Vedas would not have taken place. So, Vedanta means the highest knowledge, and in the subsequent talks on Taittiriya Upanishad, I will also throw more light on what is this highest knowledge, Antaha. Anta also means the termination, that is, it is the highest knowledge beyond which there is nothing else to know. That is one meaning of Vedanta. Another meaning is, it ends not the knowledge, but the knower himself. It is the resolution of the knower in pure knowledge. This Bhagavan Ramana Maharshi championed this point all his life, and he lived it his life. That is, it is the resolution of the knower, which is the ego, and it is not, and that this resolution takes place, the dissolution of the knower takes place in pure knowledge. The knowledge remains, but not the knower. This is like in the famous book Alice in Wonderland, which is a brilliant allegory in spiritual journey, where the little girl Alice, she goes through various forms within a single day. And when the caterpillar asks that girl, "Who are you?" then she says, "I am confused. I have changed into so many forms within one day. I really do not know who I am." So this is finally drives you to Atma Vichara. Who am I? That is a inquiry which every one of us have to pursue at some point or other. And in that same book, when the Cheshire cat has its encounter with Alice, then after some dialogues, then the cat starts vanishing. And as the cat starts vanishing from the tail onwards, slowly the tail vanishes, and then the posterior part, then middle part, finally the head, and then the cat has a huge grin. And the cat is vanishing slowly from tail onwards, and finally even the head also disappears, but the grin remains. This has very profound spiritual implication, spiritual allegory, meaning that the grin remains, but the cat has vanished. In Vedanta, we see this parallel as the knower has vanished, but knowledge remains, the happiness remains, Ananda remains. The person who has realized the self is Ananda Swarupaha, Jnana Swarupaha. He is not a Jnani, he is not an Anandi. He is not around as a person who possesses Jnana, or he is not around as a person who possesses happiness, but his very nature is Jnana Swarupaha, Ananda Swarupaha. He is the embodiment of Jnana and embodiment of happiness. He is not a owner of knowledge or owner of happiness. Therefore, the grin remains, the person has vanished. Vedanta means this dissolution of the personality, the limited individuality, the separative I, the ego, that disappears. But knowledge in it, all its fullness, it remains, it blooms, and it blooms in perfect happiness. So this is the meaning of Vedanta. And therefore, the Upanishads talk about the glory of the knowledge of the self. In Shveteshvatara Upanishad, it says, how can you achieve this summum bonum of life, the ultimate goal of life, namely the realization of the truth of oneself? Is it possible to achieve that without going through all this? Then the Upanishad says in a taunting way, Yada charmavat akasham veshta hishyanti manavaha tada tada devam avijnaya, tata devam avijnaya dukkasya anto bhavishyati. That means when the human being can, if he can ever roll up the sky like a piece of leather and keep it on his hip and then walk away, if he can achieve that, if he can achieve rolling up the whole sky like a piece of leather and then goes about, then in that case he can also put an end to all suffering and sorrow without the knowledge of that Supreme Lord. That means just as you cannot manipulate space in any way, it is not available for your any grasp. In the same way, you cannot put an end to this suffering, sorrow, which is a predicament of the ignorant person, without attaining the knowledge of the Lord, who is shining as one's own self. So this is the glory of the knowledge of the self, which is revealed only in the Vedas, the Vedantas. Vedanta means the Upanishad portion. Again, another Upanishad says, Tam viditva mrityum atimrityumeti nanyah panta vidyate yanaya. Tam viditva, that is knowing that Supreme Lord, one crosses atimrityumeti, one crosses death. And nanyah panta vidyate ayanaya, there is no other path than this, than knowing that, than gaining that knowledge of the self. Vedahametam purusham mahantam adityavarnam tamasah parastat tamevam vidvan amrita iha bhavati nanyah panta vidyate yanaya. Another Upanishad says this, the same thing. Namely, Vedahametam purusham mahantam, the sage who has achieved that knowledge of the self, he declares, Veda, that knowledge of that Supreme Lord, now I have gained. Vedahametam purusham mahantam aditya varnam tamasak parastat. It is beyond all darkness and sorrow. And it is effulgent with knowledge. Aditya varnam. Tamevam vidvan amrita iha bhavati. The person who has the knowledge of that Supreme Lord, he alone, tamevam vidvan amrita iha bhavati, he becomes immortal right here, not after death going to some other world. He becomes immortal right here. Amrita iha bhavati nanyah panta vidyate yanaya. There is no other path to attaining immortality except through gaining of the knowledge of the self, the knowledge of the Lord, who is shining within as your own self. So this is the vision of the Upanishads. And therefore there is no other short circuit possible, and therefore Vedas, as mentioned earlier, they have the origin in the very Lord, and the knowledge of the Lord itself can be attained only through the Vedas, only through the Upanishads. Therefore Shastra yonitvat shastrastya yonihi shastram yeva yonihi. Therefore Vedas, the glory of Vedas is immeasurable, and for a person who is a seeker of the ultimate knowledge, he has to take up this Vedanta Vichara, which is found in the end portion of the Vedas. Namely, after all the Karmakanda is over, one has to enter into the Jnanakanda, which is comprised of Upanishads. And in the next the series of the next few talks, we will take up one of the most important Upanishads, namely the Taittiriya Upanishad, one of the 10 major Upanishads, major because they have been commented by Acharya Shankara. And we will I'll try to give an essence or a summary of the Taittiriya Upanishads in a few talks. Hari Om Purnamadah Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vasishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om